In a world where hustle culture collides with wellness warnings and workplace demands keep evolving, how do we stay sharp without burning out? How do we navigate the endless stream of wellness trends while actually getting results? This is the Work and Wellness Podcast, and I'm your host, Ange Davis. Drawing from my own journey of wins, stumbles, and honest revelations, I'll be bringing you raw, unfiltered conversations with experts and inspiring guests who've been there, lived it, and found a better way. Together, we'll cut through the noise and workshop what it really means to be well in today's workplace. No more choosing between success and sanity. No more sacrificing health for achievement. Whether you're struggling with burnout, searching for purpose, or simply ready to work smarter, not harder, you're in the right place. This is real talk about real solutions for real people. Let's get into it. Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. We are at the end of the year, and today's episode is going to be covering your survival guide to navigating the end of year exhaustion. I think we are all needing it. We are in the last month of the year. We have made it, but I don't know about you. I'm feeling a little bit weary. And so today I really wanted to cover how to navigate exhaustion as we get to the end of the year. I know there is still so much great stuff on for the last month, whether it's from a work perspective or a personal perspective. And I want to make sure that we all have the energy to be able to get through to the end of the year, but also the focus to get through to the end of the year, because there's nothing worse than getting to the end of the year and just feeling like we can't even enjoy the project completions that we're getting to or the events because we're just so bloody tired. In today's episode, we are going to understand how to recognize end of year burnout, particularly the symptoms, both physical and mental symptoms. We're going to cover some energy management strategies, so ways to look after your energy and preserve your energy. Some psychological techniques to help with resilience as we're coming to the end of the year, and talk about setting realistic expectations for the final weeks, as well as some sustainable closure rituals, which are so good for us to do. It helps us not just finish the year in a really strong way, but also to feel great coming into 2025. Let's get into it. I wanted to cover off just some of the symptoms of end of year burnout. Now, I don't want to alarm anyone. These are not necessarily permanent symptoms. They might just be because we are at the end of the year and need a little bit of a break. But it's really important to take time and check in with ourselves and just see how we are feeling. So, physical indicators of burnout. Beyond normal tiredness. Now, I know a lot of us are tired, and if you've got children, tiredness is often a given, but beyond your normal levels of tiredness is definitely a sign of that end of year burnout. Feeling exhausted even after sleep, so waking up feeling unrefreshed. Decreased immunity. So many people at the end of the year, particularly if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, we call it a summer flu. People get that summer sickness, and it's typically because we are having our downtime after our end of year rush. And persistent low-grade headaches is another symptom or sign of end of year burnout. Some emotional indicators. Increased irritability. I definitely can resonate with that one. When I get to the end of the year, I'm often a little less tolerant and patient. Emotional numbness. This is something that I think a lot of people get to the end of the year. They're not excited or happy. They're not sad either. They're just a little bit apathetic as the end of the year comes. So this is definitely a sign of some end of year burnout. Disproportionate reactions to things. If someone cuts you off in traffic or doesn't deliver a project in time and you overreact to that, that's also a sign. Overwhelm on small tasks. If someone asks you to do something small, that can definitely be a sign when you just become so overwhelmed by a small task. Decreased motivation. I know this is definitely one that a lot of people experience, and a sense of detachment from work. And finally, some cognitive indicators that we are getting that end of year burnout. Finding it hard to concentrate. So you're sitting down to do a task or a project or in a meeting and you're finding it really hard to concentrate and stay focused. Decreased creativity is another one. Forgetfulness. So feeling like, oh my gosh, I knew I had to do something, but I can't remember what it is. Or you're in a meeting and you take an action away, but if you don't write it down, sort of not remembering what that was. Mental fog, or feeling like you can't solve problems. So your problem solving ability is diminished. Like I said before, I listed all these symptoms. I don't want anyone to be alarmed about these. It's very normal and they're all usually a result of the current season that we're in, getting to the end of a very busy year. They can be overcome though with some really easy to implement practical tips. And I wanted to share some of these with you because I think they have a really powerful impact, and they can be really small efforts or little bits of time that you can inject into your day that have a really huge impact on your ability to get to the end of the year and not feel like you're burnt out. So a really great micro recovery tip that I love to share is energy budgeting. So it's really about prioritizing the tasks by energy requirement rather than in any other way. There are so many different ways to prioritize tasks and work and projects, but prioritizing them by energy requirement is a really cool tip. What I like to do is schedule my most complex work during my peak energy hours. Now, these energy hours will be different for everyone. For me, my energy hours are usually sort of between 9 a.m. and midday. That's where I have the most focus, energy, creativity. And so I like to plan and schedule my most complex and important work for that time. And then also creating buffer zones between high intensity tasks. How many of us just go from one high intensity task to the next, to the next, to the next without any break? And it means that by the time you're getting to those really important high energy tasks later in the day without any buffers, we're just not being as effective, creative, or able to solve problems. And incorporate rest. So this is again coming into that buffer zone, but rest is so important. And I'm going to share a quote on rest at the end that I think is just really, really pertinent. But incorporate some rest. It doesn't have to be long rest. You can get outside, just go downstairs, walk around the block from the office, come back upstairs, get some fresh, bright sunlight in your eyes, really good to recharge. I feel like it's almost like plugging you into a socket, getting that sunlight. And if you can, take your feet and get them into the earth. It might just be some grass. I know when I worked in banking, we had a garden out the back of the offices, and I would just take my shoes off and stand in the garden. All of those things are really, really good ways to replenish your energy. Then there is physiological resets, which help to reset your energy in the micro moment that you're in. One of my absolute favorites is Stanford breaths. So these Stanford breaths incorporate a physiological sigh, but what they do is very quickly switch you from your sympathetic or your fight or flight to your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. And that just helps you calm the nervous system. And when our nervous system is calm, we're using less energy. So Stanford breaths are a big inhale through the nose right into the belly, an extra sip of air at the top, and a big sigh all the way out. Doing 3 to 5 of these can instantly put you back into your rest and digest. So it's a really great tip. You can do it between meetings. And when I talked a moment ago about creating buffer zones between high intensity tasks, a Stanford breath is a really awesome way to create that little buffer zone. Micro movement breaks, these are my favorite. Anyone who's heard me speak or run a wellbeing workshop knows that micro movement breaks are my favorite. And my goal is to walk into any corporate office and seeing people do 10 squats on the hour every hour. I'm not sure I'll get there, but I'm here for a bold mission. And so micro movement breaks, it doesn't matter what that is. It could be a walk around the block, which is excellent. It also helps you to get outside and get some fresh air and ground. Or it could just be standing up at your desk and doing 10 squats. I even say to people, if you feel awkward doing that in an office, or if you're in a male-dominated office, which I was, you can even go to the bathroom and just do 10 squats up and down. Hydration's really important, and natural light. So again, like I said before, getting outside and getting some natural sunlight in your eyes is excellent for a physiological reset for your body. And finally, my favorite physiological reset is a power nap. When I worked in corporate, I loved a power nap. And on my first job, my first graduate job out of uni, I'll never forget, I worked for an executive recruitment firm and I would go up to our client meeting rooms at lunchtime and chat to my friend who was the receptionist, and I would go into the meeting room with the couch and have a 20-minute nap at lunchtime because I was traveling a really long way to get into the city for work at the time. I was tired. Work days were long and busy, and I'd have a 20-minute nap at lunch and it would rejuvenate me for the rest of the day. So I think there's a real power to a 15 to 20-minute nap. The other thing that's a really great micro recovery technique is managing boundaries. Now, sometimes I think the word boundary has a bit of a bad rap, and that, everyone's sort of talking about boundaries these days and implementing boundaries. And I think it's important to know that it's not boundary for boundary's sake, but rather being really strategic in the boundaries that you're asserting. So clear capacity comms. I used to say this to my team all the time. Just let me know your capacity and we'll be able to manage the workload around it. So clear capacity comms to your leader, to your team, really important, I think, at this time of year. Strategic no saying. And if you haven't listened to episode 1, I cover why saying no is important and different ways to say no as well. So if you haven't listened to that, I encourage you to go back and listen. Super important. Delegating, if you can, really key to navigating this time of year and being able to see through the fog of tasks to make sure that we're really strategically deciding the work that needs to be done rather than just being reactive. And then realistic workload negotiation. This is the time of year when everyone thinks that there's this weird arbitrary deadline of Christmas and that everything needs to be done before then. But the reality is things don't need to be done before Christmas. Quite often, they can flow through into the new year. January's usually pretty quiet in most corporate spaces, and we can kind of do those tasks then. Unless it's something that is super urgent, then I would be thinking about how you can push things over into the new year. Those are some practical ways, I think, to help you manage your energy and burnout at this time of year. And now I think it's also really important to set expectations. So how do we set expectations for what we're going to be able to achieve and complete realistically by the end of the year? And I'll tackle this from 2 perspectives. The first is from an organizational perspective, so if you're a leader, and then from a personal perspective, but still in a work context. So organizationally, it's really important as a leader to be transparent and clear about the capacity of your team so that people aren't piling stuff on your team and adding all these extra tasks that just don't need to be done. So being really clear about comms. And I used to play a bit of a trading game, to be honest, to say if that's really important, I can do that, but one of these 5 things has to come off the priority list. So if you really want to get what you're saying done, sure, but one of these things has to come off my team's priority list. So doing a little bit of a trade can be really helpful. Doing a bit of an exercise with your team on critical versus non-critical tasks, so they're very, very clear on what they need to be prioritizing. Obviously, creating a supportive team environment and enabling people to ask for help, I think, can be a really, really powerful way for the team to feel like they're supported, but also like they're supporting each other too. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the season of being tired and that energy is low. And I used to implement a daily check-in with my team, really just to see how they're going, where their energy's at. And Brene Brown has a really good way of doing this. She does it with her husband, so it's a little bit different. But when they get home, she will sit down and say to her husband, for example, if she's had a big day and her energy's low, they will sit down and she'll say, look, I'm at a 20 out of 100 and I'm going to need some help to get through the evening. I'm tired. I just don't have the energy. And her husband will come in and say, you know what? I've got you. I've got the 80. We're going to do this together. If you're both at 50, amazing. If you're both at 100, even better. But sometimes you might both come in and one's at 20 and the other's at 30. And you think, okay, what are we going to do to get through, to look after each other, to make sure that we can get through the evening, the week, the project without snapping or completely burning out? And it's just a really important conversation to have, and something that I think is a really powerful tool that can be done in teams as well. From a personal perspective, we can be moving so quickly at this time of year, and it can be a really powerful exercise to just take 10 minutes at the end of every week and do a little capacity assessment to see how you're going with your capacity. Do you need to take anything off your plate? Do you need to delegate anything? Or do you have capacity and you can pick some things up from your team? Communicate early. I think this is so important. Not communicating when a deadline's missed, but communicating before that so that people have those expectations managed. Ask for help. I am so bad at asking for help. I just think I should be able to do it all myself, but I've gotten a lot better, and it really does make you feel good when you're able to get through something and someone can help you with that. And the classic under promise and over deliver. It really just helps to keep people off your back, and it means that you are not feeling that extra pressure of trying to deliver something that you're just not going to be able to do. All right, let's tackle how we can create sustainable closure rituals to feel good going into 2025. So you've got some tools to practically help manage your energy. You've got some micro recovery techniques. Here are some ways that you might want to create some really nice sustainable closure rituals for you and your team. So from a professional perspective, a year-end performance review can be a really nice way to create some closure. I know a lot of workplaces have their performance reviews at different time of years. You know, I've been in workplaces that have them July time, some in October time, often tied to a bonus cycle. But there is no harm in doing an end of year review as well. It doesn't have to just be within the formal construct of the work performance review. Doing an end of year review and looking back on the 12 months can just be a really powerful way to close out the year. Completing any meaningful projects. If there are projects that matter a lot to you and completing them will make you feel really good going into the year, make sure those projects are the ones that are prioritized. Documenting learnings. I love this tip. So often we document the things that went well, but documenting learnings is really important because they're so good to make sure that you review and take those learnings into the new year and the new projects. And finally, celebrating team and individual wins. I find we work so fast, and once something's done, the tendency is always to think, what next? What's the next project? Moving on, and not taking time to pause and reflect. And pausing and reflecting is a great closure tool, but it also gives energy to be able to sustain the performance for the next year as well, because you're not feeling like, what's this all for? From a personal perspective, a few things that I love. A gratitude list for the year, thinking about the top 3 to 5 things that you are so grateful for in the year that's gone. Acknowledge your achievements. Again, we don't often acknowledge personal achievements. So think back. What were the things that were amazing that happened to you this year? Doing a bit of energy restoration planning. So what are you going to implement over the break, over the summer break, if you're taking one, to restore your energy? And in January, I'm going to do a series full of a summer reset plan and ways to restore energy. So keep an ear out for that. And finally, incorporating some fun and play into your end of year break. Fun and play is so restorative, and life can get so serious and we can take everything so seriously, but having some fun and play, getting back to the things we love to do as kids, or the things where you just completely lose time, can just be so good for resetting energy. I wanted to finish by sharing some great books on this topic that might be a good summer read. The first one is Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Awesome to really getting underneath that stress cycle and energetically how you can get out of it. And then Rest, Why You Get More Done When You Work Less. I mean, what a title. Who doesn't want to read that? And that's by Alex Pang. And I'll leave you with a quote from that book, which I think really covers off on why rest is so important. And in the book, he says, rest is not something the universe gives you. It's something you take. Rest is not passive, but active. It's not the absence of work, but a deliberate, strategic choice that enhances our productivity, creativity, and performance. So leaving you with that quote, I encourage you to get some rest in throughout December where you can over the summer break. And now you've got some really good tools to incorporate as well. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Ange Davis. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.